Chapter 213. Go to the Internet. After Li Yundong left the cafeteria, Feng Ji, who was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time, came to his senses. Ignoring the noisy students around him, he took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. He whispered, "Xiaofan, I'm no match for him. Well, this guy seems to be an inner disciple. Well, I see." After hanging up the phone, Feng Ji's eyes flickered for a while, and then he left the cafeteria. Go to the Internet. 7 K.O.M. At the same time, when Li Yundong caused another big trouble in the school cafeteria, Su Chan had already returned to the foot of the mountain of the Fox Zen school with her master. Su Chan clearly remembered that she had left the sect for as long as she could remember. She only vaguely remembered that there were several Shibua and Shiji in the sect, but she couldn't remember their appearances and figures clearly. Su Chan knew that she was the youngest junior of the Fox Zen school. This time, she was afraid that she would have to call everyone elder or senior. She couldn't help but feel a little timid. She hid behind Ao Wushuang and didn't dare to come out. Although Ao Wushuang knew what her disciple was thinking, she was not in the mood to coax her. When she thought that her sect was about to be in trouble, she was very anxious. When she reached the top of the mountain, she rushed all the way to the mountainside. Not all the temples and Taoist temples in the world were built on the top of the mountain. Most of them were built on the mountainside. Ao Wushuang walked quickly all the way. The dense jungle around her was blooming with flowers. Many tourists stopped to watch on the Bluestone Road, but she was not interested in looking at them. The little fox also followed her step by step. Her eyes were rolling, and she looked around curiously and timidly. In her impression, these things seemed to be very familiar, but also very strange. Halfway up the mountain, a corner of a Taoist gate was faintly revealed in the dense forest. When Ao Wushuang saw it, she immediately became spirited and went up to greet it. Su Chan had always felt very strange. In her opinion, her sect was called the Fox Zen School. Since it had the word Zen in it, and the sect was established under the guidance of Zen Master Baizhang, and her grandmaster had mostly practiced Buddhist cultivation methods back then, why had her sect become a Taoist sect now? Su Chan had thought about this question before, but every time she asked, Ao Wushuang would always say, "You're still young. You don't understand these things until you grow up." To watch the net. 7 K.O.M. Color *** literature _learning% super #fast. Now, Su Chan couldn't help but tug at the corner of Ao Wushuang's clothes and ask, "Master, shouldn't our Fox Zen school belong to the Buddhist school? Why do you live in a Taoist temple?" Ao Wushuang patted Su Chan's hand, which was holding the corner of her clothes, and said, "It's a long story. I'll tell you later." Su Chan couldn't help pouting and muttering in a low voice, "I knew it would be this sentence again." Ao Wushuang ignored her and knocked on the door. After a while, the wooden door opened with a creak. A beautiful Taoist nun walked out from the left and right side of the door. When the Taoist nun saw Ao Wushuang, she was stunned. "What can I do for you?" Ao Wushuang glanced at her and walked inside. "Where is Lu Yi? Go and tell him that I'm back." When the Taoist nun saw that Ao Wushuang had not announced her name and had directly called her leader by his name, as well as barging in without permission, she was shocked and angry. She blocked her way and said coldly, "Who are you? Tell me your name." Ao Wushuang looked the Taoist nun up and down and saw that she didn't look like a fox spirit. Moreover, the red pill in her body had been broken and she had lost her virginity. She was wearing a Taoist robe, but her face was covered with heavy makeup. She was dressed in a coquettish manner and had changed into fashionable clothes. Ao Wushuang knew that she must be an outer disciple. She immediately sneered and said, "You, an outer disciple, don't deserve to know my name." The Taoist nun sneered and retorted, "It's true that I'm an outer disciple, but who do you think you are? How dare you break into the Taoist mansion? How dare you? Ao Wushuang raised her head and laughed. I can come and go as I please. It was the same 10 years ago, and it's the same now. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Hurry up and get out of my way. After that, Ao Wushuang flicked her sleeve and a strong wind blew past. The Taoist nun flew a few meters away and hit the wall. Then, she slowly slid down like a picture. Although Ao Wushuang's move looked fierce, in fact, she used a strong and gentle force. She put the Taoist nun on the wall, but let her fall slowly. She was not injured, showing her excellent kung fu. Go and look at the net. However, as an outer disciple, the Taoist nun didn't know the trick at all. She immediately shouted, "Someone is here. Someone is trespassing and beating people." As soon as she finished shouting, a dozen Taoist nuns in Taoist robes rushed out of the Taoist temple. Some were holding horsetail whisks, some were holding long swords, and some were holding ame daggers. They surrounded Ao Wushuang, and one of them shouted angrily, "Who dares to be so arrogant here? Are you tired of living?" Ao Wushuang glanced at these people coldly. She didn't take them seriously at all. She sneered and said, "A group of people who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Who is your master? Shout out, lest you say that I'm bullying the weak later." When the Taoist nun who had been released by Ao Wushuang saw that many of her companions had come, she felt confident and said arrogantly, "I think you are the one who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you know what kind of place this is? Tell me your name, lest you say that we are bullying the weak later." Ao Wushuang raised her head and laughed arrogantly. "Do you think you can win by bullying the weak with more people? Do you think you are in a club? It's ridiculous. Choner, go up and teach them a lesson. Otherwise, when someone comes later, they will say that I'm bullying the weak." Su Chan had always been a bold and heartless person. At this time, with the support of her master, she immediately giggled and replied crisply, "Yes, master." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure instantly turned into a wisp of green smoke and rushed toward the Taoist nuns. The Taoist nuns only felt their vision blur, and then their hands went numb. The weapons in their hands fell unconsciously, but they didn't fall to the ground. In the blink of an eye, they were taken away by Su Chan. By the time they reacted, Su Chan had already returned to Ao Wushuang's side. She was holding a lot of horsetail whisks, long swords, ame thorns, and other instruments in her hands, looking at them with a smile. The Taoist nuns were shocked and angry. They stood where they were and were disarmed before they could resist. They shouted angrily, "Damn it, what's going on? *CK your grandmother, what's the point of sneak attack? Hey, give me back my weapons. You little bitch, if you have the ability, come here openly." They cursed for a while, and Ao Wushuang frowned. She rolled up her sleeves and shouted angrily, "A group of bastards, what did your master teach you? Today, I may have to teach you a good lesson on behalf of your master." When the Taoist nuns who had been released by Ao Wushuang saw that Ao Wushuang and her disciples were powerful, they immediately sat on the ground and began to scold like a shrew. "Come on, someone is bullying us. They are going to kill us. They are going to kill us." Ao Wushuang was so angry that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. She thought to herself, "I haven't been back to the sect for 10 years. Why has it become a place to hide evil? What's wrong with the leader?" Su Chan also widened her eyes and thought to herself, "Is this how my fellow disciples are? It can't be, right? This is clearly a group of shrews." Just as the two of them were stunned, they suddenly saw a figure flying quickly from the mountain. A blue light flashed, and a figure stood in the Taoist courtyard. This person was about 1.78 meters tall, with a bun on his head. He was dressed in a Taoist robe and carried a sword on his back. He had an extraordinary temperament and an immortal aura. When the Taoist nuns saw this person appear, they all went up to him with joy and shouted, "Master, a bad person is bullying us." The 3-foot-long Bahuang sword hidden behind her jumped out with a clang and automatically surrounded Ao Wushuang as if to protect its master. It let out a sword cry like a dragon's roar. For a moment, the sword chi in the courtyard was everywhere, and the wind was blowing. When Yi Yu saw the Bahuang sword, she was shocked and angry. "He actually gave this sword to you. Well, you really colluded with the Zhengyi school. No wonder Yan Fang of the Linggong sect came to ask for a punitive expedition 9 years ago. Tell me, did you deliberately lead these disasters to the sect?" After she finished speaking, the chainsaw Vajra will behind her jumped out and rotated quickly. It also let out a harsh and sharp buzzing sound, provoking the Bahuang sword not to be outdone. For a moment, these two treasures were challenging each other in the air. The sword chi in the Taoist Academy soared into the sky and was full of murderous intent. Su Chan looked at the field with a dumbfounded expression and said in her heart, "No way, as soon as he came back, he actually started fighting by himself? Is there a mistake? /om/" Chapter 214. Go to watch net. Ao Wushuang was the youngest shimi of the Fox Zen school. She was the youngest of the older generation, but she had the highest aptitude and the highest spiritual energy. She was the top master of the Fox Zen school. Watch net. 7 KOM. In addition, she had been arrogant and rebellious since she was a child. She had once risked universal condemnation and fell in love with the leader of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school. Because of this, she had fallen out with all her fellow disciples and was expelled from the sect 10 years ago. 10 years later, when she came back, she had caused a lot of trouble. The other people in the sect naturally had a lot of ideas about her. As the second most powerful master of the Fox Zen school, Yi Yu was even more upset. When Ao Wushuang was not there, she was the number one master, and everyone had to look up to her. But when Ao Wushuang came back, she was going to be the second. Who could stand it? Ao Wushuang had always been indifferent to everyone in the sect. She was as cold as ice, even to her Shiji. Yi Yu felt that Ao Wushuang was arrogant because of her talent. She looked down on her Shiji just because her spiritual power was higher than hers. Therefore, she had always been holding back her anger in her heart and wanted to surpass Ao Wushuang. Now that there was such a good opportunity, how could Yi Yu let it go? She was furious and immediately threw the danger of the enemy to the back of her mind. She would solve her personal grievances first. Seeing that a fight was about to break out, Su Chan subconsciously shouted, "Don't fight." As soon as she said that, everyone's eyes immediately turned to her. Yi Yu sneered and said, "Who do you think you are? Is it your turn to speak here?" Yi Yu was very protective, but Ao Wushuang was even more protective than her. Ao Wushuang sneered and said, "She is my disciple. Why can't she speak?" Yi Yu was furious. She pointed her finger, and the chainsaw Vajra suddenly buzzed loudly. The surrounding air was trembling, and the sand and stones on the ground were flying. The momentum was terrifying. Ao Wushuang snorted coldly, and the Bahuang sword around her suddenly flew into the air with a swoosh. It looked down at the chainsaw Vajra from above. The sword edge trembled, and in an instant, it split from one sword into two, two into four, and four into 8. In a short time, it turned into a steel lotus throne made entirely of sword edges. The lotus leaves were turning one by one, like countless saw teeth, which was very frightening. Seeing that the two of them were about to fight in the next second, an extremely gentle voice suddenly rang out, flowing through everyone's hearts like a clear spring. "Sai, we're all from the same sect, why do we have to fight each other?" Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a woman in a white Taoist robe with a transparent gauze draped over her shoulders slowly descending from the sky. This woman was extremely beautiful. Her black hair was slanted, and there was a golden hairpin in her black hair. Although she was also a member of the Fox Zen school, she was beautiful and dignified, like a bodhisattva standing on the ground. Her face was solemn and dignified, which made people respect her. Go to see. As soon as Yi Yu saw the woman, she immediately stopped and nodded to her. Eldest Shiji. Su Chan stared at the woman and couldn't help asking Ao Wushuang in a low voice, Master, is this eldest Shiji? Ao Wushuang nodded. Yes, this is your eldest Shiji, Mo Ashi. Su Chan exclaimed, Eldest Shiji looks like a bodhisattva. There was a rare hint of admiration in Ao Wushuang's eyes. She said, Eldest Shiji also cultivates Vajra Buddhism, so she looks solemn and has the bearing of a bodhisattva. Although Mo Ashi's appearance was no different from that of a young woman in her 20s, her bearing made people feel that she was like an immovable bodhisattva in the world. As soon as she appeared, everyone present bowed to her in unison. After a while, several beautiful women in various costumes flew over. Ao Wushuang said in a low voice, This is your third Shibua Zhuang Yiting, fourth Shibua Zhang Sun Hong, fifth Shibua Lu Yuehong, and sixth Shibua Chao Yi. Su Chan looked at them one by one, and finally, her eyes fell on Mo Ashi. Mo Ashi looked at Su Chan with a kind smile on her face, and then said to Ao Wushuang, Little Shiji, you're back. If there was anyone in the Fox Zen school who could make Ao Wushuang feel some respect, it would be eldest Shiji Mo Ashi, except for Lu Yi, the head of the school. She raised one hand and nodded slightly, which could be regarded as a greeting. Eldest Shiji, how have you been? Mo Ashi smiled and said, I'm fine. It's good that you're back. As she said this, she turned to look at Yi Yu and said softly, Shiji, when the school is in danger, can't we talk about it later? Aren't you making your friends suffer and your enemies happy? Yi Yu glanced at Ao Wushuang with a sneer. Is she also a relative? Humph. Why are you talking about me and not her? Although she refused to admit defeat, she waved her hand and took back the chakram. After that, she ignored the others and turned to leave. Ao Wushuang didn't wave her hand. In an instant, the countless Bahuang swords turned into one, and then flew behind Ao Wushuang in the blink of an eye, as if they had never appeared. Mo Ashi glanced at Ao Wushuang and said with a smile, I haven't seen you for 10 years. Little Shiji's cultivation has improved again. Ao Wushuang smiled faintly. Not at all. I'm just standing still. But eldest Shiji's cultivation has increased a lot. Mo Ashi sighed softly and said, I'm sorry to make you laugh. She scolded with a smile, you're glib. Go ahead. Don't be naughty. Su Chan said coquettishly, Master, I'm not young anymore. After that, she skipped out of the door. After going out, Su Chan ran straight to the room of Lu Yi, the leader of the sect. She ran to the door, but for a moment, she didn't dare to go in. She just poked her head out of the door and looked at Lu Yi, who was smoking a hookah. At first, Lu Yi deliberately pretended not to see Su Chan, but later, when he saw that Su Chan was really pitiful, he couldn't help laughing. Well, little girl, don't hide there. What do you want from me? You must not have come to the temple for nothing. Su Chan giggled, jumped in front of Lu Yi, the leader of the sect, and said coquettishly, Grandmaster, the paper crane I saw you with last time was very fun. Can you give me one to play with? Lu Yi knocked on the hookah and said with a smile, How did you know that the paper crane was mine? Su Chan rolled her eyes and said slyly, I didn't know at first, but now I know. You devil. Lu Yi chuckled and spread out his palm. A paper crane the size of a fist flew toward Su Chan. Su Chan was overjoyed and immediately grabbed it in her hand. She was overjoyed and said, Does it mean that it can go wherever I tell it to go? Lu Yi glanced at Su Chan and said, Yes, it's the same as when you use a magical item. Su Chan held the paper crane as if it was a treasure, as if she was afraid that sect leader Lu Yi would go back again. She turned around and ran out. After running out, she turned around and said with a smile, "Sect leader Grandmaster, thank you. You are a good person." Lu Yi chuckled and watched Su Chan's figure disappear at the door, revealing a meaningful smile. Su Chan returned to her room with the paper crane in her hand. When she passed by her master's room, she was careful and did not dare to breathe too much, as if she was afraid of waking up her master. It was not until she returned to her room that she closed the door tightly and let go of the paper crane on the table. As soon as she let go, the paper crane flew out with a whoosh. It twisted its neck and flapped its wings, as if it was uncomfortable being held by Su Chan just now. Su Chan found a pen and moved closer to the paper crane with a smile. She whispered, "Little sweetheart, don't move. I'll write a few words on your body. Help me pass a message to Yundong." Seeing that Su Chan was about to write on its body with a pen, the paper crane immediately spread its wings and was about to escape. Su Chan was quick and grabbed it. "You want to run?" "No way." The paper crane was caught by Su Chan. Seeing that the tip of the pen was getting closer and closer, it couldn't help struggling. Su Chan saw that it was struggling so hard that she couldn't write, so she couldn't help saying, "Don't move. Just write a few strokes." After that, she suddenly had an idea and said, I know. You can't write on your body, right?" The paper crane seemed to understand her words and actually nodded its head. Su Chan giggled. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" She thought for a moment, found a piece of paper, wrote a sentence on it, and then put it in the body of the paper crane. She tapped the head of the paper crane with her finger and said, "Hey, you don't want me to write on your body, so I put a note on it. If you lose it for me, hum." After that, Su Chan made a very fierce gesture of tearing the paper. The paper crane was so scared that it shrank its head. Su Chan said, "Alas, my phone was also confiscated by my master. Otherwise, I wouldn't have looked for an unreliable guy like you. Forget it, now fly to Yundong's side for me. Remember, don't lose the note." After she finished speaking, Jihe looked around with a blank look on her face. Su Chan couldn't help but say angrily, "Hey, why are you in a daze? Hurry up." The paper crane raised its head to look at Su Chan and shook its head vigorously. Su Chan said angrily, "Why don't you want to go?" Then, she grabbed it with both hands, wanting to ravage it. The paper crane was so scared that it struggled hard again. Su Chan saw that it was struggling so hard that the note fell off. She couldn't help but say angrily, "Hey, do you have to be so scared?" As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly thought, "Oh, right, I haven't told it where to go yet." Su Chan patted her forehead. "I'm so stupid." After that, she leaned over to the paper crane and told it the address. Then, she affectionately patted its head and said, "Now you know where it is. Hurry up." The paper crane was afraid of being tossed around by Su Chan, so it quickly spread its wings and flew away. With a whoosh, it disappeared out of the window. Su Chan looked in the direction where the paper crane had gone and couldn't help but feel a sense of longing. I wonder how Yundong will react when he sees my note. Will he miss me? What will he write back to me? Just as the little girl was thinking about the sweetness, she couldn't help but reveal a knowing smile on her face. However, when she gradually retracted her infatuated gaze, she swept her gaze across the table and suddenly saw a note with words written on it lying alone on the table. Su Chan's eyes suddenly went blank. She wanted to shout, but she was afraid that her master would hear her, so she couldn't help but gnash her teeth and whisper to the window, "Hey, idiot, you didn't bring the note. Come back, /om/." Chapter 215. Go to watch net. But the paper crane had already flown far away. How could Su Chan call it back? The little girl was so depressed that she wanted to fly out and chase the paper crane back. But as soon as this idea came to her mind, she heard Ao Wushuang say from the next room, "Chaner, what did you just say?" Su Chan immediately replied embarrassedly, "No, nothing, master." After that, she sat down on her bed gloomily, hugged her knees with her hands, and rested her chin on them. She couldn't help complaining to herself, Su Chan, you are so stupid. It's not easy for you to get a paper crane. Now it's all over. When Yundong gets it, how will he know that I gave it to him?" But after thinking about this, she couldn't help comforting herself, well, maybe Yundong will understand when he sees it. He should have this tacit understanding with me. While she was thinking about this with resentment, Li Yundong had just returned from class in Tiannan City with the psychic fan of 7 treasures on his back. Go to watch net. The latest movies, TV series, and variety shows were all there. As his cultivation deepened, Li Yundong gradually understood the meaning and true meaning of cultivation. Gradually, he began to no longer rely on the car as a means of transportation, but more on his own legs. Whether it was going to school or getting off school, he would run back with his legs carrying the psychic fan of 7 treasures, which weighed more than 50 kilograms. Along the way, he paid attention to adjusting the qi in his body. It could be said that he was cultivating all the time. When he returned home, he opened the door with the key. As soon as he entered the door, he smelled a fragrance. Li Yundong looked around curiously and saw 2 dishes on the table. Li Yundong took a look and saw that the first dish was a vegetable platter stir-fried with celery, lilies, corn kernels, and asparagus. There was no oil in it, and a thin layer of starch juice was poured over it, making it look crystal clear. In addition, these dishes were arranged in a beautiful fan shape. The colors of each dish were clearly layered, making it look beautiful and delicious. It was impossible for a chef to make such a dish. Li Yundong laughed. He didn't even need to look to know that it must have been Zi Yuan who had cooked the dishes. He shouted in the dining room, "Hey, is it a holiday today? The eldest senior sister of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school is cooking in person?" After a while, Zi Yuan came out of the kitchen wearing an apron, holding a soup bowl in her hand. Li Yundong glanced at it and saw that it was a bowl of white fish soup. From a few meters away, Li Yundong could smell the strong aroma of fish, which made him want to eat it. Li Yundong chuckled and said, "So rich? What happened? Why is it so grand?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, "You have just begun to practice your magical powers, so you shouldn't focus your attention on trivial matters. Moreover, the divine tribulation will come at any time. You should concentrate all your time on cultivation. Watch net. So, I'll help you with these trivial matters." Li Yundong put away his school bag and the fan of 7 treasures, washed his hands, and walked over to the dining table. "Do I have to pay you?" Zi Yuan took off the apron in front of her and said with a smile, "Can you afford it?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "How can I afford to hire a fairy like you as a nanny? If I do that, my life will be shortened." As he spoke, he pulled Zi Yuan's seat away. After she was seated, he went to serve the rice himself and said, "Come on, sit down. I'll go get the rice. If I let a fairy like you go in and out of the kitchen and let others see you, they will say that I don't know how to show mercy to women." Zi Yuan looked at his figure bending over to serve the rice, and a gentle smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Are you always so glib to girls?" she asked. Li Yundong filled the bowl with rice and placed it in front of Zi Yuan. He cried out in grievance, "How can I do that? I'm just talking about the matter as it stands. You think too much." Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong, her eyes fixed and a little complicated. After a while, she sighed in her heart. There is nothing wrong with the world, and people are just making trouble for themselves. Li Yundong, you should know that all people in this world are actually mediocre. Sometimes, they don't know how to tell whether you are heartless or affectionate. But she didn't say this out loud. She just lowered her head and ate her food silently. Ziyuan was a person who paid great attention to rules. She didn't talk when she was eating, and she didn't talk when she was sleeping. According to Li Yundong's observation, even every step she took seemed to be the same size, as if she had deliberately measured it with a ruler. Except for a few times when she lost control of her emotions and had some normal reactions, most of the time, she looked like a fairy who had descended to the world. Li Yundong chewed and swallowed slowly. He was about to get up to clean up when he heard a knocking sound coming from the window connecting the living room and the balcony. Li Yundong walked over curiously and saw a paper crane beating the French window with its wings as if it were alive. What's going on? Li Yundong opened the door curiously. As soon as the door opened, the paper crane flew into his palm. The paper crane shook its body as if it was trying to shake something out, but after shaking for a while, there was no movement. It turned its head to look at its body, and suddenly, its whole body trembled. Then, its whole body began to tremble. Li Yundong looked at the paper crane, which seemed to be psychic, and suddenly found it interesting. He asked curiously, "Where did you come from?" The paper crane raised its head and looked at him. It was in a daze for a while, then pointed out the window with its wings. "Go to see." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Someone sent you here?" The paper crane nodded quickly. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly asked, "Did Chick send you here?" The paper crane didn't know who Chick was. It was at a loss for a while, staying in Li Yundong's palm, not knowing how to react. Li Yundong smiled very confidently. "Yes, you must have been sent here by Chick. Wait here, I'll write a note." As he said this, he went into the room and wrote a note. Then, he put it in the body of the paper crane and said, "Go, take this back with you." This time, the paper crane carefully looked behind it. After making sure that the note was still there, it spread its wings and flew away with a whoosh. Su Chan was waiting anxiously in the room. While she was pacing around, she suddenly saw a white shadow flash by. The paper crane flew back. Su Chan immediately rushed over and grabbed it. She gritted her teeth and said, "You idiot! You bastard! You ran away without a note. Do you want to piss me off?" The poor paper crane was almost out of shape by Su Chan. It struggled hard, its head shaking, and kept pointing at its back with its wings. Su Chan glanced at it and was surprised to find that there was a note in it. She let go of the paper crane and opened the note. It was Li Yundong's familiar handwriting. "Chick, is that you?" Su Chan was so happy that her chest almost exploded. She subconsciously wanted to let out an excited scream, but as soon as the sound reached her throat, it was abruptly stopped. She covered her mouth with her palm, as if trying to stop the sound from coming out. After a while, the girl nervously glanced through the crack of the door at her master outside. Seeing that she was still quietly meditating, she was relieved. Su Chan's eyes turned into crescent moons. She held the note with both hands as if it was the most precious treasure in the world. She was full of joy and thought, "Yundong is Yundong. He guessed it was me. Hee hee." She giggled at the note for a while, then suddenly remembered something. "Oh, I was too happy and forgot to reply." She quickly rushed to the table, picked up a pen, and wrote a note. Then, she stuffed the note into the body of the paper crane and whispered kindly, "Good girl, I misunderstood you just now. I'm sorry." The poor paper crane was trying to smooth out the wrinkles on its body caused by Su Chan's pinching with its mouth and wings. It raised its head, as if it was too angry to ignore Su Chan and proposed to go on strike. Su Chan suddenly said angrily, "If you don't fly over quickly, I'll tear you apart." The paper crane was shocked. It looked at Su Chan with its head shrunk, and finally flew out helplessly. The speed of the paper crane was extremely fast. Li Yundong only felt that he had waited for about half an hour before the paper crane flew back. Li Yundong was overjoyed. He held the paper crane, took out the note and glanced at it. It was indeed a letter from Su Chan. He suppressed his ecstasy and read it word by word. "Master, you are so smart. You know it's a chick at a glance. I forgot to put a note in it just now. You won't blame me for being stupid, will you? By the way, I'm going back to the sect with my master now. You don't have to worry about me. How about you? How are you?" Li Yundong smiled and wrote a few lines on the back of the note, then clipped it to the back of the paper crane and told it to take it back. Li Yundong watched as the paper crane flapped its wings and flew away. He felt that in this era of the explosion of the internet, it was quite interesting for him and Su Chan to send a letter from thousands of miles away. When Su Chan received the paper crane, she couldn't wait to take out the note. It read, "Of course. I told you that our hearts are connected. Your master has already succeeded in the Zhuji phase. Once I pass the heavenly tribulation, I'll come and pick you up. From then on, you can travel the world and laugh at the Jianghu." Su Chan read the note over and over again. She was so happy that she felt like her heart was about to explode. After a while, she picked up the pen and wrote a few lines on the note, but she felt unsatisfied, so she crushed it and threw it aside. She picked up the pen again and wrote a few more lines. She looked at it again and again, but still felt unsatisfied, so she threw it away. She repeated this a few times, and the room was filled with paper scraps. Finally, Su Chan smiled mischievously and wrote over and over again, "Master, if you continue my next sentence, I'll believe that our hearts are connected." At this point, Su Chan wanted to write the first half of a poem, but just as she was about to start writing, she suddenly thought, "What if I can't continue this poem? What should I do? Won't I be making a fool of myself?" She thought about it for a long time, and finally, her eyes lit up. She tore the note and wrote a line on a new one. After Li Yundong received the letter by flying crane, he opened the note and saw a line of affectionate words written on it, "If the love between two people lasts for a long time." Logically speaking, there should be another sentence below. Li Yundong knew that this was Qin Guan's famous sentence throughout the ages, but the following sentence was written on the note. Li Yundong understood and smiled. He was about to write, but his heart skipped a beat. He immediately smiled evilly and wrote a line of words. By the time the poor paper crane flew back, it was already dark. As soon as it got into Su Chan's room, it lay on the table and refused to get up again. Su Chan ignored it and rushed to open the note first. As soon as she opened the note and glanced at it, she suddenly burst into laughter. She saw that the note said, "If the love between two people lasts for a long time, why would they sleep on the same bed?" Su Chan smiled so hard that her eyes narrowed into a line. She whispered, "Master, master, you're still thinking of playing tricks on me from so far away." Looking at the note, the little lass giggled for a moment, and then fell into a daze with a sweet expression on her face. Her soft little heart had long been filled with something called happiness and sweetness. It was as if secretly passing a few notes to the person she loved from thousands of miles away was already the greatest happiness in the world. Chapter 216. Go to the Internet. The little girl held the note and looked at it again and again. She knew that even Ao Wushuang next door couldn't listen to her giggling. She let out a dry cough, and only then did the little girl wake up. She stole a glance at the next door with a guilty conscience. Seeing that Ao Wushuang was still sitting steadily on the futon, she breathed a sigh of relief. Go to the Internet. Please use visit this site. Su Chan walked to the table, picked up the pen, and wanted to reply, but saw that the paper crane was lying on the table, motionless. The little girl pushed it with her finger. With a push, the paper crane tilted and fell to the side. It was like a lifeless paper, no longer having the spirituality it had just now. Su Chan was shocked. She fiddled with the paper crane with her finger again, tilting it from one side to the other. She said nervously, "Hey, why are you pretending to be dead?" But no matter how hard she fiddled with it, the paper crane did not respond at all. Su Chan muttered to herself in disappointment, "No way. What's going on?" She was full of doubts when Ao Wushuang, who was outside the room, snorted coldly and said, "The power of the paper crane is limited." "It has no power, idiot." Su Chan was shocked and subconsciously hid the paper crane and the note. But after a while, she realized that her little trick had not been hidden from Ao Wushuang at all. The little girl stuck out her bright red tongue. She gently opened the door, stuck her head out, and said weakly, "Master, you know everything?" Ao Wushuang didn't even raise her eyelids. She snorted coldly and said, "How can you hide it from me?" Su Chan had been taught a lot by Ao Wushuang, so she was obviously thick-skinned. She giggled shamelessly and said, "Master, why didn't you stop me?" Ao Wushuang snorted and said, "Is it useful? You are in Chao's camp, but your heart is in another's." Su Chan ran out of the room, pulled Ao Wushuang's arm, and said coquettishly, "Master, let me go back." Ao Wushuang opened her eyes and shouted coldly, "No, the heavenly tribulation is coming soon." "Are you going to die?" Su Chan pouted. "When will the heavenly tribulation come? I've been anxiously waiting for you every day." Ao Wushuang said coldly, "Soon, it won't take long. Don't worry." Su Chan rolled her eyes and smiled again. "Master, you will help him, won't you?" Ao Wushuang snorted. Her face was cold and she did not say anything. To watch the net. 7 KOM. Su Chan shook Ao Wushuang's arm with all her might and said in a sweet voice, Moss father." At first, Ao Wushuang could still keep a straight face, but after a while, she couldn't help it anymore. The corners of her mouth curled up, revealing a smile that was both angry and funny. She pretended to be angry and glared at Su Chan. "It said that girls are extroverted. I think it's not wrong at all." Li Yundong responded and opened his mouth. He was about to ask, "Don't you often spend the night here?" But when he was about to say it, he felt that it was inappropriate, so he closed his mouth again. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Ziyuan went out and gently closed the door. After she went out, Li Yundong felt that the room was empty and he was alone. He glanced around and saw that everything in the room had been cleaned up by Ziyuan. The table was covered with a tablecloth, which made it look clean and neat. There was a teacup with warm water on the table, and a note under the teacup. Li Yundong walked over and took a look, only to see that it said, "The heavenly tribulation is coming soon. Don't be distracted." Li Yundong's expression turned cold. He put the note back in its original position, pressed it with a bowl, and drank a mouthful of water. As soon as the water entered his stomach, Li Yundong felt a warm feeling flowing in his blood. The top of his head seemed to be a little transparent, and the nidin in his lower abdomen was vaguely much stronger. No way, drinking a cup of water can strengthen the shentong? Li Yundong suddenly felt a little strange, but he didn't know what the reason was for a while. Li Yundong thought for a while, but couldn't come up with an answer. So he sat down cross-legged in the living room alone. He practiced qi until dawn. Then, carrying the fan of the 7 treasures on his back, he walked toward the school. His legs were as fast as the wind, and he didn't care about the sidelong glances of the passers-by. His speed was not much slower than the speed of a bus, and it only took him half an hour to reach the school. As soon as he entered the school gate, he found that all eyes were on him. In the past, 7 or 8 out of 10 people in this school recognized Li Yundong, but there were always 2 or 3 who didn't care about the world. Especially after the freshmen entered the school, only 5 or 6 out of 10 people would recognize Li Yundong. But now, 9 out of 10 people knew Li Yundong. As soon as Li Yundong entered the school gate, his iconic black cloth wrapped around the fan of the 7 treasures attracted everyone's attention. The students whispered to each other. Li Yundong was a little scared by their stares. Just as he was about to walk into the teaching building, he heard a voice laughing next to him. "You don't know who you are, Li Yundong." Then another voice laughed and said, "What's the point of mingling around the school?" Li Yundong didn't need to look back to know that it was Feng Na and Cheng Cheng. He turned around with a smile. Sure enough, it was Feng Na and Cheng Cheng. They were standing side by side, looking at him with smiles on their faces. Cheng Cheng was indeed someone who had begun to integrate with society. She wore a white long-sleeved shirt. The buttons on the front of the shirt were so full that they looked like they were going to burst. She wore a pair of black Western-style trousers, which outlined her slender figure. She was dressed like an office lady, which made her look very feminine and very professional. Li Yundong looked her up and down and smiled. "Not bad. TSK. You look like an office lady now." Cheng Cheng slapped Li Yundong on the shoulder and said, "Oh, come on. How can someone like me catch your eye?" There was a saying among martial artists, strangers should not get close to you. In other words, acquaintances and strangers should not get close to you, let alone reach out and pat you on any part of your body. They were afraid that you would suddenly attack them. When two people's kung fu skills were very similar, this kind of sneak attack was absolutely impossible to guard against. It was the same for cultivators. When Li Yundong saw Cheng Cheng's hand coming at him, he instinctively dodged. Cheng Cheng was stunned when she hit nothing. Only then did Li Yundong react. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "Sorry, it was a conditioned reflex." Cheng Cheng came back to her senses and waved her hand. "It's okay. You're a martial artist. I understand." After that, she seemed to remember something and said angrily and hurriedly, "By the way, I heard Nana say that you showed off your power in the cafeteria last time?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly. "What do you mean by showing off my power?" Then he turned to Feng Na and said, "Feng Na, don't make a big deal out of this." Feng Na covered her mouth and laughed. "I'm just telling the truth." Cheng Cheng's heart was filled with indignation. "I didn't see it last time. I lost big time. No, you have to compensate me." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How do I compensate you?" Feng Na and Cheng Cheng looked at each other, and there was a hint of success in their eyes. Feng Na smiled and said, "I'll ask you to move the table. After all, you're so strong." Li Yundong laughed. "Hey, you're just looking for a strong man, you know. Dangua doesn't do that anymore." Cheng Cheng laughed. "Dangua doesn't do that anymore, but we in the Celestial Empire do. Cut the crap and come with us at noon." Li Yundong shook his head and nodded helplessly at Cheng Cheng and Feng Na. "I really don't know what to do with you two." "Well, we'll talk about it at noon. I have classes in the morning." After saying that, he walked into the school building. After a few steps, he found Feng Na and Cheng Cheng following behind him. "Why are you following me?" he asked curiously. "Are you afraid that I'll run away?" Feng Na smiled and said, "There's no class today, so the two of us will compromise and be your bodyguards today." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who's protecting who? He shook his head and walked toward the classroom. As soon as he entered, he saw Ding Nan walking toward him. "Do you want to know where Zhou Qin is?" she asked coldly. Although Ding Nan was good at observing people's expressions, she couldn't see the slightest bit of hypocrisy in his eyes and face. She couldn't help but feel a little shaken. Could it be that he really doesn't care about these things? How could this be? How could there be such a person in this world? Ding Nan sneered. I'll give you 1 day. Think about it carefully. I'll tell you where she is in a day. Then, she turned around and walked to the back of her seat. She sat down and looked at Li Yundong coldly. She sneered in her heart. I want to see what kind of expression and reaction you'll have when you see her. When she was in power, everyone was trying to get close to her. Now that she's out of power, everyone is avoiding her. I want to see what kind of choice you'll make in a day. Hey, what's wrong with her? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to chase after Ding Nan and ask her about it, but Ding Nan ignored him and sat back in her seat. Li Yundong had no choice but to walk to the back of the classroom and sit down. Feng Na and Cheng Cheng looked at each other and sat down as well. Li Yundong thought for a while in the back of the classroom and said, No, I have to ask her. Li Yundong, it's not like you haven't dealt with Ding Nan before, Feng Na said. She won't let go once she's set on something. You won't be able to ask her. She'll tell you in 2 days. Don't worry. Cheng Cheng was stunned by Ding Nan's words before. She sneered and said, Who knows if she's bluffing and deliberately stirring up trouble to attract your attention. She's been at odds with Zhou Qin for a long time. How could she possibly know where Zhou Qin is? Li Yundong shook his head. No. Ding Nan has been with Zhou Qin for a long time. She has accumulated a lot of connections and resources. She must have her own information sources and channels. If Zhou Qin is not around, she is the most well-informed person in this school. Even so, there's no need to be anxious. The more anxious you are, the happier she will be and the less she'll tell you. Feng Na said. Cheng Cheng quickly fanned the flames and said, That's right, that's right. Li Yundong thought for a moment and let out a long sigh. That's all we can do. I hope Zhou Qin is fine. Although he said so, his brows were tightly furrowed. He felt as if there was a stone wall in his chest, which made him very uncomfortable. Feng Na saw the worry on his face, so she smiled and changed the topic. By the way, Cheng Cheng, how's your work going? She said, winking at her. Cheng Cheng was a little confused at first. Didn't I tell you about work a long time ago? Why are you asking again? She thought. But when she saw Feng Na winking at her, she immediately understood. She pretended to be indignant and said, Don't mention it. I'm so angry. Li Yundong's attention was indeed attracted. He asked in confusion, What's wrong? He asked curiously, Why are there so many people at this hour? He glanced around and saw that the podium and tables were already in place. There was no need for him to move them. Li Yundong asked in confusion, Didn't you say that you wanted me to move the tables? Where can I move the tables? Feng Na laughed and said, I was just teasing you. How could I let a famous person like you move the tables? I was afraid that you wouldn't come to my campaign speech, so I made an extra move to get you here. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I said that I would come, so I will. Feng Na made a face at him and said, That's not necessarily true. You are a famous person now. You are too busy to show your face. As she spoke, the students around them looked at Li Yundong with eager eyes, as if to prove that she was right. Some of the students couldn't help but whisper to each other as they looked at Li Yundong. After a while, one of the students shouted, Boss, we want to watch Living with a Stewardess. As soon as the words left his mouth, another voice shouted, I want it uncensored. Then, a third voice said, Boss, you didn't finish it last time. Let's finish it this time. Li Yundong was dumbfounded and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then, he saw the boys among the crowd shouting, We want to see the stewardess, we want to see the stewardess. Li Yundong saw that their voices were in sync, like a chorus, and it was very F***king rhythmic. Some of them were even clapping and stamping their feet. Damn, do you think there's a concert here? Li Yundong was about to speak when he suddenly heard a voice in the crowd shouting, "Stewardess, stewardess, stewardess." Then, almost everyone in the small auditorium, regardless of gender, followed suit and shouted in unison, "Stewardess! Stewardess! Stewardess!" Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed out loud. Empty my ass. He was a cultivator with a strong aura. Although he didn't speak loudly, his voice was still clearly heard by everyone. Suddenly, the small auditorium fell silent. The silence only lasted for a while before another voice shouted, "No hair, no horse. No hair, no censored." Then, the crowd shouted in unison, "No hair, no horse. No hair, no horse." Feng Na and Cheng Cheng were amused by the scene in front of them and laughed wildly, rolling on the ground with their hands covering their stomachs. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh as well. After laughing for a while, he suddenly forced himself to stop laughing and deliberately put on a righteous face. He put his palms together and said, "Amitabha, this poor monk has stopped watching porn for many years. Benefactors, you can stop now." Li Yundong's Buddhist chant was clear and loud, and his powerful and magnetic voice echoed in the small auditorium. For a moment, the voices of the crowd were suppressed, and the small auditorium became quiet again. Seeing that the crowd had finally quieted down, Li Yundong also breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to find a place to sit down, he suddenly heard someone in the crowd say, "Good, good." It turns out that the master has cultivated to the point where he has seen all the porn in the world and has no horse in his heart. Amitabha, sex is emptiness, and emptiness is sex. Good, good, good. As soon as the voice finished speaking, a burst of crazy laughter suddenly broke out in the small auditorium. The sound almost lifted the roof. Li Yundong couldn't help but curse in his heart, F***ck, what kind of a group of stupid people are they? Chapter 218. Go to the Internet. Li Yundong hadn't expected that the people in the auditorium would still remember the flight attendant incident so vividly. It had been more than 2 months, but they could still make such a big fuss about it. This bunch of idiots. They really don't want to cause a scene. Li Yundong rolled his eyes at everyone in the room, especially at Feng Na and Cheng Cheng, who were laughing so hard that they almost passed away. He threw a pair of huge health balls at them. Go to the Internet. Go to the Internet. Go to the Internet. Normally, when these students saw Li Yundong, none of them dared to come up to him and flirt with him like this. This was because Li Yundong's aura was too strong, and his legendary deeds were too powerful. It made him look like a god that no one dared to approach. But at this time, the students all realized that there was no doubt that this guy was a mortal like them. Li Yundong was made fun of for a while. When he saw Feng Na and Cheng Cheng laughing so hard that they were about to pass out, he couldn't help but say, "Hey, if you guys keep laughing, I'm leaving." Feng Na rubbed her stomach and waved her hands in pain. "My stomach hurts. I'm laughing so hard. I can't breathe," she moaned. Cheng Cheng was also laughing so hard that she couldn't breathe. Her stomach hurt so much that she could only gasp and grimace. Li Yundong shook his head and reached out to stroke Feng Na's back. Feng Na suddenly felt warm all over, as if a warm current was flowing into her back, smoothing out her breathing and stopping her laughter. Cheng Cheng saw that Feng Na was obviously getting better. She grabbed Li Yundong's arm and pointed at herself. Although she was smiling, there was pain in her eyes, and she couldn't say anything. Li Yundong followed her example and stroked her back. Immediately, she felt her breath come back to her body. Feng Na and Cheng Cheng finally caught their breath. They touched their chests in shock and looked at each other. Suddenly, they felt like laughing again. Li Yundong quickly threatened, "Hey, if you guys keep laughing, I'm really leaving. I don't care if you guys die of laughter." Feng Na held back her laughter and said, "Look at how high your social prestige is. It's a good thing you're not running for president of the student council. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any hope." Li Yundong rolled his eyes at her and said, "I think it will be a little difficult for you to be elected as the president of the student union." Feng Na smiled and said, "No, what happened just now made me feel that I will definitely be elected as the student council president." Li Yundong laughed and said, "If you can become the president of the student union, I will definitely help you perform well in your show." Feng Na couldn't help but say, "Wow, so you're planning on not putting in any effort?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Wrong, I was going to stand you up." Ruan Hongling thought to herself, "You are the one who really doesn't know the difference between heaven and earth." Although Li Yundong is annoying, he is now a rising star of cultivation with small Shentong. "Who do you think you are, barking here all day long?" However, she couldn't say these words out loud, so she could only sneer. Seeing her sneer, Yanhua thought that Ruan Hongling agreed with his words, so he became more and more proud. He said to Feng Na arrogantly, "Senior sister, how is your preparation for the election speech?" Feng Na smiled and said, "I didn't prepare much. I guess you are well prepared?" Yanhua pretended to be modest and said, "It's just so." As he spoke, he looked around and couldn't wait to jump on the stage immediately and show off his skills. After a while, the small auditorium became more and more crowded. Gradually, it was overcrowded. In the end, the teachers and school leaders entered and sat in the front row. Although this kind of student union election was voted on by the students, the final school committee had a veto vote, although the school committee almost never used this veto vote in order to respect the rights of the students. Go to the internet. Yanhua, Feng Na, and the others who were going to participate in the election for the position of president of the student union sat in the front, while Li Yundong, Ruan Hongling, and Cheng Cheng sat in the back. After a while, after the teacher's opening remarks, the first student came on the stage and began to speak. Li Yundong looked at the field and said to Ruan Hongling in a low voice, "Why are you here? Don't tell me you're here to supervise my cultivation." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "Don't flatter yourself. I'm here to experience more of the world. If the cultivators of the Linggong sect can't understand the world, their cultivation skills will be greatly reduced." Li Yundong was a little stunned. "Oh, I see." After a while, the student who was speaking on the stage walked down. The students under the stage whispered to each other and commented on the candidate just now. The second contestant was a short and stout boy. After he got on the stage, he began his speech. His saliva flew everywhere, and almost all the teachers in the first row below the stage had their faces covered. The teachers had no choice but to put up the books in front of them to block the wind and rain. Yanhua, who was under the stage, sneered secretly. "Humph, a third-rate university is a third-rate university. What kind of talent can there be? How can such a person participate in the election for the president of the student union? What a joke." This year, there were not many students who participated in the election for the president of the student union. There were only 8 people in total. Among them, the first few seemed to be of uneven quality. Many students under the stage booed. When Yanhua came on the stage, the students were stunned and stopped booing. Yanhua came from an excellent family. His parents were high-level intellectuals. It could be said that he came from a scholarly family. He had read all kinds of books since he was a child. Although he was not a scholar, he could be considered a rare scholar among his peers. As soon as Yanhua came on the stage, the pride and confidence that came from his bones stunned the students under the stage. He looked around the stage, and wherever he looked, the whispers stopped. The students were shocked by his momentum and stared at him intently. They wanted to see what kind of election speech this imposing boy would give later. Even the teacher under the stage nodded secretly. Finally, there's a decent candidate. After Yan Hua calmed the crowd, he began his speech. Li Yundong listened carefully under the stage. Although he didn't like this boy very much, to be fair, Yan Hua was indeed eloquent. His speech was confident and full of passion, very much like the style of a Western speaker. It was a completely unscripted speech, but there was no pause between the words. Moreover, it was orderly and reasonable. There were also some profound special nouns and English in the middle, which greatly shocked the students under the stage. After Yan Hua finished his 10-minute speech, the audience was silent. Almost all the students were looking at Yan Hua, and in their minds, they were secretly shocked. Although this person looks cocky, he does have some ability. The top scorer is really not for show. Clap, clap, clap. A teacher took the lead and began to clap, followed by a second and a third person. Even Li Yundong couldn't help but clap and nod secretly. Ching Ching couldn't help but say angrily, "No way, you actually defected to the enemy? Have you forgotten how this guy mocked you?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I don't know what kind of person he is, but his speech was really good. He deserves my applause." Ching Ching was angry with Li Yundong. She rolled her eyes and said, "Okay, you're a big man. I think Nana's election will be difficult later. Damn it, I feel uncomfortable when I think about this guy being the president of the student union. Hey, can you stand him being the president of the student union? You're so cocky now. Won't you be cocky when the time comes?" Li Yundong smiled slightly. "What does it have to do with me who is the president of the student union? Of course, I personally support Feng Na being the president." Ching Ching said angrily, "Are you an idiot? If you let him be the president of the student union, will you still have a good life? Won't he make things difficult for you all day long?" Li Yundong smiled noncommittally, but in his heart, he was very disapproving. "Are you kidding me? I'm a cultivator. Why would I be afraid of a president of the student union? Isn't this just a joke?" Just as he was secretly snorting, Feng Na had already walked onto the stage. Ching Ching said thoughtfully, "Li Yundong's popularity at Tiannan University has reached an incredible level. If you use his popularity to your advantage, you might be able to achieve this result. But aren't you afraid of the school board's veto?" Feng Na blinked at Ching Ching. "Have you forgotten what we saw at the school board last time?" "Ah, you mean..." Ching Ching suddenly remembered that the last time she and Feng Na stood in front of the school board's office and saw an official walk out of it, all the heads of the school had behaved respectfully toward him. Since then, not a single teacher in the school had dared to point fingers at Li Yundong. Ching Cheng's eyes widened. Ching Ching pointed at Feng Na and said with a smile, "You sly guy. So you knew that the school leaders didn't dare to offend Li Yundong's background." The two girls whispered to each other and laughed secretly. Yan Hua was so angry that he almost went crazy. He rushed up to Feng Na again and shouted angrily, "I don't accept this. If you have the ability, then come and compete with me for the election. I won't lose to you." Feng Na looked at him sympathetically and sighed. She said, "You didn't lose to me, you lost to Li Yundong." Yan Hua couldn't swallow his anger. He choked and said, "I lost to him. He didn't participate in the speech?" Feng Na smiled and said, "How could I have defeated you without him? I'm just borrowing his power. If he runs for the president of the student union himself, both you and I will have to stand aside. Do you understand? Yan Hua, you have to remember, as long as you are at Tiannan University, don't even think about competing with this boy, because the height he has reached is beyond your reach, /om/. Chapter 220. Go to watch net. After Li Yundong rushed out of the small auditorium, he ran dozens of meters away before he stopped in shock. He put his hands on his hips, shook his head, and sighed to himself, Li Yundong, you are a cultivator, but you were so scared that you peed your pants. You are really useless. Li Yundong looked back at the small auditorium and said with a wry smile, this place is definitely my bad luck. It was like this last time, and it will be the same this time. Li Yundong shook his head and laughed for a while, then walked to the school library, ready to return the books and borrow some new ones. Go to watch net. When he arrived at the library, the old man in charge of the library saw Li Yundong and immediately smiled. Have you finished reading the books you borrowed yesterday? Li Yundong smiled, took out 2 books, and handed them over. Then, he chose 2 more books and said with a smile, yes, sorry to trouble you again. The old man smiled and said, don't mention it. This is our job. As he spoke, he walked to the library area and helped Li Yundong choose the 2 books he wanted. He handed them over with a smile, but his eyes fell on the fan of 7 treasures tightly wrapped in cloth behind Li Yundong. He suddenly asked, is it convenient for you to carry such a big thing on your back? Li Yundong took the book and said casually with a smile, at first, it was very inconvenient, but now I'm a little used to it. The old man nodded slowly and asked tentatively, if I ask you what's inside, you probably won't tell me either. Li Yundong chuckled and didn't answer. He just waved his hand politely to the old man and said, goodbye, teacher. I'll come back next time. The old man also smiled and didn't say anything more. Li Yundong walked slowly home. When he got home, it was already past 5 o'clock in the afternoon. As soon as he opened the door, he saw that the cooked food was already on the table. It was steaming and fragrant. Li Yundong knew that it must have been Ziyuan's cooking. He smiled and shouted, Ziyuan? Did you cook it? He shouted and walked to the kitchen, but he didn't see Ziyuan. Although the kitchen had been cooked, it was neatly cleaned and shiny. Li Yundong sat at the table and ate his dinner slowly. After cleaning the dishes and chopsticks in the kitchen, he returned to the living room and found that Ziyuan was still making a cup of water on the coffee table in the living room. He tested the temperature. Although it had been a while, the water was still warm. Li Yundong couldn't help but sigh in his heart, except for her cold temperament and being a little too otherworldly, she is simply the most perfect woman in the world in other aspects. She is so beautiful, does housework so well, and is so meticulous. Whoever marries her is really blessed by several lifetimes. Li Yundong was stunned, and his expression became a little strange. In his opinion, Ziyuan had been helping him like this, but she had never asked for anything in return. This kind of behavior was simply incredible. Could it be that this fairy sister has fallen in love with me? A thought came to Li Yundong's mind for no reason, but he quickly denied it. Impossible. Even if she likes me, I don't like her. I like my girl. Li Yundong coughed dryly and said to Ziyuan, by the way, I haven't asked you yet. Why did you 2 come so late at night? Ziyuan said, the divine retribution is getting closer and closer. I came to see how far you have progressed in your Shentong cultivation. By the way, do you have anything you want to learn? Li Yundong asked curiously, you want to teach me magic cultivation? What do you know? Before Ziyuan could speak, Wan Hongling rushed to say, what are you talking about? Do you know how powerful Sister Ziyuan is? There is no magic of the 5 elements that she doesn't know. Li Yundong didn't bother to bicker with this girl. He looked at Ziyuan and asked, do you know heavenly thunder? Ziyuan was shocked. You want to learn heavenly thunder? Li Yundong nodded and said, of course. I want to learn heavenly thunder. Zi Yuan frowned secretly and said, you should know that the magic of the world can't be separated from the 5 elements of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Although there are thousands of Taoist magic, most of them are the same. Only heavenly thunder magic is above the 5 elements. Heavenly thunder is the power of heaven. The power of heaven is unpredictable, and heavenly thunder is difficult to cultivate. Compared with heavenly thunder, the 5 elements are the easiest to learn. If you learn it to a high level, it will not be inferior to the power of heavenly thunder at all. Why do you want to give up the easy and seek the difficult? Why do you want to learn such a dangerous and difficult magic? Li Yundong suddenly smiled. You always tell me that the divine retribution is coming. But I don't even know what heavenly thunder is. How can I go through the divine retribution? As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Only by understanding heavenly thunder can I better deal with it. What's more? As Li Yunyang spoke, his face suddenly became very unruly. He sneered and said, I remember you once said that the people of our Taoist sect pay attention to going against heaven. Man can conquer heaven. My fate is up to me, not to heaven. Li Yundong quickly walked past Zi Yuan and the others. He walked to the balcony, pointed to the starry sky outside, and said loudly, but in fact? Every one of you is afraid of heavenly thunder and divine retribution. Because of this, you don't dare to ask too much about the affairs of the world. Chapter 221. Go to watch net. After Zi Yuan finished speaking, Li Yundong immediately nodded and said, well, how can I learn to fly by qi? Zi Yuan was not in a hurry to speak. She turned her head and whispered to Ruan Hongling, you go back first. I'll teach him how to fly by qi. Ruan Hongling nodded. Surprisingly, she was not in a bad mood. Before she left, she just glanced at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes and then flew back to her residence. Go to watch net. 7 K.O.M. After Wan Hongling left, Zi Yuan said to Li Yundong, in fact, it is not difficult to fly by qi, but the difficulty lies in the fact that people who want to fly by qi must have a huge amount of zhenqi. Ordinary people may not be able to cultivate their zhenqi to the point where they can grasp their own bodies even after cultivating for a lifetime. However, you obtained the Renyuan Jindan by chance. You have a huge amount of Jindan's primordial qi, and you are in the zhuji phase, so the zhenqi in your body is especially pure and vigorous. You don't have to worry about this. Li Yundong asked, what exactly should I do? Zi Yuan said, sit down on the futon first. I'll tell you later. Li Yundong sat down cross-legged and asked, then what? Zi Yuan said, run your qi as usual, but be careful not to meditate. You have to maintain your divine sense and consciously control the zhenqi in your body to release it to your lower body. Li Yundong was already extremely familiar with the control of qi. He immediately followed Zi Yuan's instructions, closed his eyes, and mobilized the zhenqi in his body continuously, releasing it to his lower body. As soon as Li Yundong released his zhenqi, he felt as if there were countless tentacles under his body. It was as if he had a few more legs, and he could feel things outside his skin. After a while, after Li Yundong's huge zhenqi was released to a certain extent, his body slowly rose by half an inch. At first glance, it seemed that he was floating in the air. After a while, Li Yundong faintly felt that the qi under his cross-legged body seemed to have turned into a thick leg, lifting his body abruptly. Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, suddenly said, now, open your eyes. Li Yundong opened his eyes and found himself floating in the air with his but half a foot off the ground. Li Yunyang was shocked. The qi in his body immediately became chaotic. As soon as the qi was chaotic, the turbid qi was born. His body fell from a height of half a foot and fell onto the rush cushion. Although Li Yundong's body had been reconstructed by the Jin Dan, he was not an invincible Vajra body. He couldn't bear falling down like this, especially when a man was sitting cross-legged. If he fell down on his buttocks, although he had his fat buttocks as a buffer, his two balls would also be affected. F***ck. Li Yundong felt as if someone had punched his lower body hard. The pain made him see stars and grimace. He looked at Zi Yuan, gritted his teeth, and said, "Why did you ask me to open my eyes? I almost fell to my death." Zi Yuan looked at him in confusion. "Is it very painful?" Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan with a face full of hidden bitterness and said indignantly, "You women don't know what it feels like to have a pain in the ass." Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong and blinked her eyes. "Then do you know what it feels like for a woman to have her period every month?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I mean, this kind of thing shouldn't have come from a fairy like you, right? What's more, shouldn't you be a cultivator who was in the Zhuji phase before the arrival of Tiangui? How could you know how menstruation feels?" Zi Yuan said lightly, "My master said that cultivators have to taste all kinds of human emotions, so I simulated that scene and tried that feeling." Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan with his mouth agape and tongue tied. In his mind, the scene of Zi Yuan, a fairy-like woman, changing a sanitary pad in the bathroom appeared. That scene was really disgusting, too disgusting. Li Yundong gave her a thumbs up and said to Zi Yuan, "Very good, you're awesome, you're invincible. I'm convinced. Let's not talk about this. What should I do next?" At the beginning, Zi Yuan felt that it was a little inappropriate to say this, but words that had been said were like water that had been poured out. How could she take them back? Although her face was slightly hot because of Li Yundong's words, fortunately, she had a strong ability to control it. She just said lightly, "You have to slowly learn to open your eyes and control your breath." Only when one's aura was stable could one's true essence be stable. Once one's true essence was stable, one would be able to grasp balance in midair and then use the power of true essence to catch oneself. Watch net. 7ko-Li Yunyang nodded. First, he closed his eyes and began to control his qi. Then, he released his Jinqi and slowly lifted himself up. After reaching a certain level, she said, "Now, open your eyes." This time, Li Yundong opened his eyes and was mentally prepared. At first, his body only swayed slightly, but he soon stabilized. Zi Yuan nodded and then said, "Open your eyes and move your qi a little higher." Watch net. Li Yundong tried to control the Jinqi to raise himself a little higher. Before long, he was already more than a meter above the ground. At this time, Zi Yuan said, "Slowly try to put your feet down." Li Yundong did as he was told and slowly put his feet down. As soon as he put his feet down, he immediately felt his body suddenly sink and he fell to the ground with a thud. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Why? Why do I feel like my body has become much heavier as soon as I put my feet down?" Zi Yuan explained, "Because when people sit cross-legged, the qi in the human body is the smoothest and smoothest." As Li Yundong watched her fly over, he suddenly had an idea and asked, "Hey." Zi Yuan stopped in midair and turned to look at him. He asked with a smile, "How does it feel to put on a sanitary pad when you have that?" Zi Yuan's body shook and she almost fell from the air. She glared at Li Yundong with shame and anger. She wanted to say, "What does it feel like for you men to have a pain in the ass?" But when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she couldn't say them out loud. Li Yundong's prank had succeeded, so he stopped bickering with her and went into the room with a laugh. Zi Yuan was left alone in the air, staring at Li Yundong's departing figure with a flushed face. Fortunately, it was night time. Otherwise, if this bastard saw her reaction, it would be so embarrassing. Zi Yuan took a deep breath and calmed down before returning home. As soon as she entered the balcony, Ruan Hongling immediately came up and asked, "Sister Zi Yuan, what happened just now? Why do I feel like there was a divine punishment? What a terrible divine power." Zi Yuan said with some resentment, "Li Yundong is a newborn calf who is not afraid of tigers. He flew very high in one breath and almost caused a divine punishment." Ruan Hongling's eyes suddenly widened. So he was scared? Zi Yuan couldn't help but say with a strange expression, "It doesn't seem like it. On the contrary, his fighting spirit has increased." Ruan Hongling was stunned on the spot and could not come to her senses for a long time. After a long time, she sighed faintly and said, "Sister Zi Yuan, do you think he can survive the heavenly tribulation?" Zi Yuan's expression suddenly became very serious. She thought about it seriously and said, "I don't know. Based on the current situation, it's unlikely." Ruan Hongling sighed and said, "If he can survive the heavenly tribulation, it is very likely that he will become a great cultivator with great magical power in the future." Zi Yuan suddenly smiled and shook her head. Watch net. Color *** literature _learning% super #speed. Update. Ruan Hongling asked, "You don't believe me?" Zi Yuan still shook her head and said, "No, it's not very likely, but definitely. Moreover, as long as he can survive the heavenly tribulation, he will grow into a powerhouse that only appears once in 100 years in the cultivation world. He might even be able to establish his own sect." Ruan Hongling was extremely shocked. She felt that she had already thought highly of Li Yundong, but she hadn't expected that Zi Yuan would think even higher of him. Establish a sect? Wouldn't that be a great master like Zhang Sanfeng and Wang Yangming? Ruan Hongling said in shock. Can he compare with such a person who only appears once in 500 years? Zi Yuan looked at the place where Li Yundong lived, and her eyes suddenly became very distant. "Ding Nan, it's time to tell me where Zhou Qin is today, right?" Li Yundong asked. Ding Nan couldn't help but look at Li Yundong's eyes, trying to find a trace of hypocrisy in them. But after a long time, she couldn't find anything. She had to give up. But she was also a little unwilling to give up. She snorted coldly and asked, "Everyone is avoiding her now. Are you sure you really want to go?" Li Yundong retorted, "If you flatter her when you gain power, and throw her to the ground when you lose power, what's the difference between you and a despicable person?" Ding Nan couldn't help but feel angry. She thought that Li Yundong was calling her a despicable person. It's human nature to seek benefits and avoid harm. Do you understand? I saw that you were different from the others. That's why I tried to persuade you. How could you say that? Don't be so childish. Li Yundong said in a low voice, "If this is maturity, then I'd rather be childish for the rest of my life. Since she is my friend, then I should help her when she is in the most difficult situation. Otherwise, what kind of friend would I be?" Ding Nan felt very uncomfortable. On the one hand, she still stubbornly believed that Li Yundong was pretending to be more powerful than he was, but on the other hand, she subconsciously hoped that she could be like Zhou Qin and receive such care and concern from Li Yundong. There are many people in this world who add flowers to embroidery, but there are few who offer help in times of need. Is he such a person? Ding Nan stared at Li Yundong blankly. She felt as if her heart was being twisted by a knife. No, he must be trying to save face. When he sees Zhou Qin, he won't say that. Seeing that Ding Nan was silent, Li Yundong said in a low voice, "Ding Nan, even if your relationship with her is not good now, you should still go and see her for the sake of your good relationship in the past. Ding Nan jumped up as if her tail had been stepped on. My relationship with her has never been good. She's just using me. Li Yundong immediately said, aren't you also using her? Ding Nan felt as if someone had stabbed her in the heart. She lost her composure and shouted, the First People's Hospital of the city. If you want to go, go by yourself. I hate her, I hate her. Li Yundong had wanted to persuade Ding Nan, but when he heard that Zhou Qin was in the hospital, he couldn't stay any longer. He turned around and ran out of the school. Ding Nan stood where she was. She couldn't stop the tears from flowing down her cheeks. She murmured, why can't I let you look at me again? Now that you know her whereabouts, you're not even willing to talk to me, /om/. He shook it at Li Yundong and asked, can I smoke? Li Yundong said, yes. Zhou Keqiang smiled. Just as he was about to light the cigarette, he heard Li Yundong say. But Uncle Zhou, have you been having tinnitus recently? Your eyes are sometimes blurred, and your nose is a little hot when you breathe. Zhou Keqiang was stunned and stopped lighting the cigarette. He looked at Li Yundong in confusion and curiosity. Yes, how did you know? Li Yundong said, Uncle Zhou, the ears belong to the kidneys, the eyes belong to the liver, and the nose belongs to the lungs. Your tinnitus means that your kidneys are not good. Your eyes are blurred, which means that your liver is not good. Go to the internet. If a person's liver and kidneys are not good, then he is already suffering from a disease of great deficiency. If you still smoke, your lungs will also become bad. If a person's lungs are not good, then his nose will also be bad. The accompanying symptom is that the breath he exhales will be hot. This was the first time that Zhou Keqiang had dealt with Li Yundong. He hadn't expected that this young boy would have such a deep understanding of traditional Chinese medicine. Zhou Keqiang laughed and said, I've been smoking for decades. If it was bad, it would have been bad long ago. Although he said so, he still put away the cigarette. Zhou Keqiang looked Li Yundong up and down. After a while, he sighed and said, don't you want to know what happened? Li Yundong nodded. Zhou Keqiang sighed and then slowly told him what had happened to Zhou Qin after Li Yundong left. When he talked about the failure of Zhou Qin's negotiation with him, Zhou Keqiang sighed and said, I should have expected it. Li Jiandong was shocked when he heard this. He hadn't expected that he would cause such a violent turmoil and bring such a terrible disaster to Zhou Qin and the Zhou family. A rising family had fallen because of him. Li Yundong was stunned on the spot, and his mind was in a mess. When he heard Zhou Keqiang's words, he subconsciously asked, expected what? A trace of regret and pain flashed in Zhou Keqiang's eyes. He raised his head and looked at the blue sky, as if he was recalling something. When Qin was born, my brother found a master to help her name. At that time, the master said that Qin was a metal element and had a murderous aura between her eyebrows. In the future, her character would be strong and she would rather break than bend. In order to reduce her murderous aura, he named her Zhou Qin. Zhou Keqiang smiled bitterly. At that time, I was young and arrogant, and I was an atheist. Of course, I scoffed at this. I felt that Zhou Qin sounded too weak. I, Zhou Keqiang, wanted to name my daughter more domineering than others, so I changed her name to Zhou Qin. She was named after the Qin dynasty, the ruler of the world. Zi Yuan was like the hostess of the house, and he was like a guest. He told Zi Yuan about Zhou Qin's situation, and then told her his own thoughts and opinions. Finally, he said, do you think my method will work? Will she recover if we clear the blood clots and tumors in her spine? Zi Yuan was washing vegetables with her back to Li Yundong. After hearing this, she stopped, turned around, and thought for a moment. Then she said, in theory, it's feasible. However, even if you can cure her, what can you do? Li Yundong was stunned. What do you mean? The expression on Zi Yuan's face was indifferent. She wiped her hands on the apron in front of her and asked, even if she can stand up again, what can she do? She had lost all of her past, lost everything, could she go back to her previous life? And Zi Yuan gave Li Yundong a meaningful look. And, can you give her what she really wants? Li Yundong's whole body shook, and he fell into deep thought. It was not that Li Yundong didn't know that Zhou Qin liked him, but he really didn't expect that Zhou Qin would pay so much for him. This kind of sacrifice was so deep that he could hardly repay it. Zi Yuan sighed slightly, and her tone seemed to have seen through the affairs of the world. She said lightly, you can cure her external injuries, but you can't cure her internal injuries. Go to the internet. Don't tell me you're going to repay me with your body. Li Yundong immediately said firmly, when I went to the hospital to see Zhao Yujian last time, I heard Ding Nan say something outside the ward. She said, love is not charity. You don't have to love whoever is pitiful. I love Su Chan, and she also loves me. This has not changed, and it will not change in the future. Zi Yuan took a deep look at Li Yundong and sighed. My master once told me that the world of mortals is bitter, but the most bitter is love. He said that cultivators must not indulge in worldly love, otherwise it will be difficult for them to have great cultivation and achievements in the future. Li Yundong's face was full of seriousness. He retorted, I don't think so. I am a novice cultivator, but in my opinion, I think the reason why you cultivators cultivate is purely for the sake of cultivation. You have never thought about why I should cultivate. Your master said that the world of mortals is bitter, but the most bitter is love. Do you believe him? Have you ever tasted love? You haven't even tasted love. How can you say that love is bitter? Zi Yuan was stunned. She subconsciously asked, I saw that when you and Su Chan parted, the two of you were sad and gloomy. Tears fell like rain. Even as an outsider, I can feel the pain in your heart. If this isn't bitterness, then what is? When Li Yundong heard her mention Su Chan, he couldn't help but show a hint of softness in his eyes. He said, in life, there is nothing perfect. You only see the separation of life and death, so you think that life is bitter. You only see the reunion and separation of love, so you think that the most bitter is love. But, have you ever seen the sweetness and happiness between two people when they are together? Have you ever seen the joy of their love being satisfied in an instant when they meet again? The more Li Yundong spoke, the softer his voice became. His eyes were lost in thought, as if he had leaped to the near future, to the days after he brought Su Chan back. He said, why should I cultivate? Because I know that if I don't cultivate, I won't be able to protect myself, let alone my girl. Once something happens, we will have to face the scene of reunion and separation again. I don't want to see such a scene again, so I want to cultivate. Li Yundong said, you can think that I have no future, or that I don't want to make progress, but I am like this. I want to be a cultivator who only envies lovers, not immortals. All the motivation for my cultivation now is to make myself stronger as soon as possible, get through the heavenly tribulation, and then be with my girl. I will take good care of her and make sure that she doesn't get hurt again. Zi Yuan was stunned by Li Yundong's words. She felt that something deeply rooted in her heart had been shaken by Li Yundong. She couldn't help murmuring, Master has been telling me this since I was a child. Is he wrong? Impossible, how could Master be wrong? He has never been wrong. Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan, who had always been wise and calm, was at a loss at this time. He couldn't help saying, "Is your master always right? If he is right in everything, why did he marry Ao Wushuang back then?" Zi Yuan's body shook, and her eyes widened, unable to speak. Li Yundong suddenly looked at Zi Yuan sympathetically and said, "You said it yourself. If you don't experience the world, how can you know what it feels like? Looking at you like this, let me ask you boldly, have you ever been in love? Do you know what it feels like to be in love between two people? Can you understand the feeling of being willing to give up everything for the other party?" Zi Yuan was stunned by Li Yundong's question. She was stunned, and her mind was in a mess. She subconsciously asked, "Didn't Zhou Qin give up everything for you? How will you repay her?" There was a deep and thoughtful look in Li Yundong's eyes. He sighed softly and said, "She ruined herself and her life for me. So, I have to give it all back to her. I caused her to be unable to stand up, so I must make her stand up again. I caused her to lose her life of luxury, so I must give her another life that can be compared to it." Zi Yuan came to her senses. She realized something and asked tentatively, "Are you going to teach her cultivation?" Li Yundong nodded heavily. "Yes." Zi Yuan took a deep breath and said slowly, "Since you've made your decision, I won't say anything more." Li Yundong responded with a and nodded. Then, he turned around again. He glanced at the fruit, then turned back and said with a grievance, "The bananas are gone." At first, when Zhou Qin saw that Li Yundong had actually nodded, she suddenly became angry. But soon, when she saw his aggrieved expression and said that the bananas were gone, she couldn't help but want to laugh. But she quickly held it back and said with a cold face, "Then I want to eat peaches." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How can there be peaches in this season?" Zhou Qin said with a straight face, "I don't care. I want to eat peaches." Li Yundong sighed and took an apple from the fruit basket. Then, he sat on the edge of the bed with his legs crossed, peeling it and humming a tune. Zhou Qin saw that he was holding an apple and was peeling it hard. She couldn't help but say angrily, "I said I want to eat peaches." Li Yundong nodded, but he still didn't move. He continued to hum a tune and peel the apple. Zhou Qin was so angry that her eyebrows raised. "Are you deaf? I want to eat peaches." Li Yundong slowly peeled the apple, then threw the skin into the trash can and took a bite. He looked at Zhou Qin with a strange expression and said, "Did I say that I was peeling this for you?" Zhou Qin was stunned. She subconsciously wanted to laugh, but as soon as the corners of her mouth curled up, she held it back. She glared at him and was about to lose her temper when she suddenly heard a shout from outside. "Well, I was wondering which guy came here to make trouble. It turns out to be you." Li Yundong turned his head and saw the strong nurse downstairs standing at the door with her hands on her hips and sleeves rolled up. She was about to rush in aggressively. Li Yundong stood up and quickly waved his hands. "Don't come in." The fat nurse sneered. As she spoke, she rushed into the room. "Do you think I won't come in just because you told me not to? You." Before she could finish her words, she suddenly stepped on the banana that Zhou Qin had thrown on the ground. With a sizzling sound, she fell to the ground on her back like a mountain of gold and jade. The shoes under her feet flew up and hit her heavily in the face. At this time, Li Yundong said with a look of grievance and sympathy, "I told you not to come in." Zhou Qin couldn't help laughing anymore. As soon as she laughed twice, she saw Li Yundong looking at her. Zhou Qin's face suddenly became serious, but not long after, she saw the fat nurse twisting her body to get up from the ground while cursing. Her funny appearance immediately made Zhou Qin burst into laughter again. Zhou Qin couldn't help laughing. She didn't want Li Yundong to see her laugh, so she pulled out the pillow behind her and covered her face with it. Her whole body trembled with laughter. When had he ever spoken to her so gently? Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong blankly, a little dazed for a moment. Seeing that she didn't respond, Li Yundong said, "You don't want it? If you don't want it, I'll throw it away." But Zhou Qin suddenly reacted, grabbed it, and took a fierce bite, as if to vent her hatred. This bite was so big that she bit her tongue. The sweetness of the apple was mixed with the saltiness of blood. Zhou Qin couldn't help but think to herself, is this the taste of love? I've done so much for him, and now I can finally get him to peel an apple for me? Thinking of this, Zhou Qin couldn't help but burst into tears. As she cried, she bit the apple and said vaguely, "Li Yundong, you're so annoying, you're so annoying, /om/." Then, he pointed at the little hamster that was running on wheels in the cage. He smiled and said, "Look, even it knows to exercise to protect itself. How can you give up?" Li Yundong's words warmed Zhou Qin's heart, but she still couldn't help retorting, "They have been running on wheels like this all their lives. Can they run a meter away? They will always be in the same place, and they will never be able to escape from this cage." Li Yundong fixed his eyes on Zhou Qin and said softly, "No, Zhou Qin, they don't have the strength to break free from the shackles of this cage, but haven't you already jumped out of the previous cage?" Thinking of this, Zhou Qin couldn't help but feel an inexplicable pain in her heart. It took a lot of courage and a moment of impulse to take this step, but if she fell to her death, it would be over. But now she woke up and found that she had nothing. How could she face the future? How could she face the future? Yes, she was indeed free, but the price of this freedom was too high. Zhou Qin suddenly thought of Neo in The Matrix. He used to live in a world controlled by robots. Although he was ignorant and had no freedom at all, he lived a happy life. But when he suddenly broke free from this world, he suddenly found that the real world of freedom was so cold and cruel. Was it all worth it? Zhou Qin sat there blankly, motionless and silent. After a long time, she said slowly, "So what if I jumped out?" Li Yundong knew that although Zhou Qin's mood was much better than before, she still couldn't get over it. He didn't force her. He just smiled and said, "It will be fine. With me here, you will get better." When Zhou Qin heard this, her whole body trembled. She couldn't help but look at Li Yundong with infatuation and softness in her eyes. No matter what, he has treated me much better after all. What I have done is not in vain. Go to the internet. Although Zhou Qin didn't believe it in her heart, she still smiled slightly. Her smile was sweet and beautiful. Li Yundong wanted to make Zhou Qin happy, so he kept talking and laughing with her. He picked up some jokes and interesting things to tell her, which made her giggle all the time. Zhou Keqiang, who was about to come in at the door, took a look and stopped, then turned to leave. He sighed in his heart, sure enough, girls are extroverted. It's useless to say 10,000 words. When her lover comes, she immediately smiles. When a girl grows up, she can't be kept at home. It's a pity, it's too late. Zhou Keqiang sighed with emotion. He slowly walked downstairs and sat down on a stool by the roadside, his eyes fixed on her. After a long time, a person suddenly sat down next to Zhou Keqiang. Zhou Keqiang didn't turn his face, but said in a deep voice, "Sorry, can you leave me alone for a while?" "What's wrong, old Zhou? Are you turning your back on me so soon?" A magnetic baritone sounded from the side. Zhou Keqiang turned his head and saw a middle-aged man with a square face smiling at him. Zhou Kachang was shocked. Old Li? Why are you here? Old Li chuckled, took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, and handed it over. I came to see you, an old friend. Do you want one? Zhou Kachang reached out to take the cigarette, but his hand stopped in midair. He smiled and said, forget it, I won't smoke anymore. I quit smoking. Old Li looked at him strangely. When did you quit? Zhou Kachang smiled. Just now. After Old Li lit the cigarette, he took a puff and slowly exhaled a ring of smoke. He sighed slightly and said, Old Zhou, I know you have resentment in your heart, but don't think too much about it. You have to look at the big picture, right? Zhou Kachang smiled bitterly. I've already gotten over it. There's nothing wrong with retiring like this. In the past, I was too obsessed with being an official. I didn't handle my relationship with the He family well, nor did I handle my relationship with my daughter well. This is my fate. I accept it. Old Li snorted and said, the He family has gone too far this time. The He family has no descendants, but young master He brought this upon himself. Do you want the Zhou family to have no descendants as well? Zhou Kachang smiled and said, Old Li, it's all thanks to your help this time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Old Li laughed and said, what are you talking about? The eyes of the masses are clear. No matter what, Zhou Qin has put herself in danger, and you have also put yourself in danger. What else do they want? If the He family wants to be naughty again, I'll be the first to object. Zhou Kachang smiled with emotion and said, this is what it means to see a friend in need. Old Li snorted and said, what trouble? You won't even give me a cigarette. Zhou Kachang laughed and said, I won't smoke anymore. How about we play a game of chess? Old Li slapped his thigh and said, okay, that's what I like. As the saying goes, life is like chess, and chess is like life. Old Zhou, let's have a good talk today and experience life in chess. You know, winning and losing in life are common sense. Although you have lost a lot in front of you, it doesn't mean that you can't make a comeback. The two middle-aged men from the system found a stone platform under the inpatient building and began to play. In the ward, Li Yundong brought hot food and placed it in front of Zhou Qin. Zhou Qin looked at the dishes in front of her and suddenly said childishly, these dishes are not delicious. Li Yundong smiled and said, then what do you want to eat? I'll buy it for you. Zhou Qin rolled her eyes. She wanted to make things difficult for Li Yundong, so she said, I want to eat the food you cook. As expected, Li Yundong showed a look of embarrassment. He hesitated for a moment and asked, are you hungry now? Chapter 227. Go to Watch Network. Hearing that Li Yundong was going to give her a massage, Zhou Qin was obviously stunned. Although she didn't know why Li Yundong was doing this, she nodded gently out of love and trust for Li Yundong. 7 K.O.M. Zhou Qin's neck was slightly red. She asked softly, do I have to lie on my stomach? Li Yundong smiled and said, no, as long as you can sit on the chair. Zhou Qin forced a smile and said, then you have to help me. I can't do it alone. Li Yundong understood. He came to the bedside and held Zhou Qin's legs with one hand. One hand passed under her ribs and gently picked her up. Although Zhou Qin knew that Li Yundong was not really hugging her, she still felt a strong masculine smell blowing over her face, making her suddenly tremble slightly. Her hands involuntarily wrapped around Li Yundong's neck. Li Yundong's whole body tensed up. He didn't even dare to look at Zhou Qin's eyes. He just stiffly carried her to the wheelchair with a straight face. Then, he let out a long sigh of relief in his heart and quickly let go of her. Zhou Qin suddenly sat in the cold wheelchair from the warm embrace. The gap in her heart made her feel lost for a moment. Li Yundong pushed Zhou Qin to the corridor outside the ward so that she could breathe smoothly. Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Close your eyes. I'll give you a massage." Zhou Qin closed her eyes. She didn't know why Li Yundong suddenly wanted to give her a massage. She couldn't help feeling a little nervous, but in her nervousness, she was faintly looking forward to something. Li Yundong stretched out the palm of one hand and pressed it on the top of Zhou Qin's head. With a little qi, he transferred his vigorous and condensed Jindan's qi into Zhou Qin's body. Zhou Qin only felt that the top of her head was suddenly hot, and then there seemed to be a stream of hot air in her body, slowly rising and constantly rushing toward the top of her head. Then, when the hot air in her body touched the hot air on the top of her head, Zhou Qin's body trembled violently. She felt as if there were countless mice in her body, constantly swimming in her blood vessels and meridians, making her feel itchy, hot, numb, and limp. If it had been anyone else, they would have been twisting their bodies at this time, screaming and laughing, unable to control themselves at all. However, Zhou Qin's willpower was extremely strong, and she managed to endure it. From the outside, Li Yunyang could only see a layer of fine sweat on her neck. Other than that, there was nothing unusual. He had massaged Su Chan and Chao Kefi before, so he naturally knew what it felt like when the Yuanyang qi entered the body. Although everyone's physique might have different reactions, it was absolutely not to the point where there was no reaction at all. Watch net. Hongjiom, how is this possible? Li Yundong pondered for a while. He felt that maybe he hadn't injected enough Yuanyang qi. The magic of traditional Chinese medicine was that it often had an excellent effect on some difficult and complicated diseases that Western medicine couldn't do anything about. If ordinary traditional Chinese medicine wanted to evacuate the tumors and extravasated blood in Zhou Qin's wound, they had to use acupuncture to stimulate her due meridian and the acupoints around the wound, thereby accelerating the flow of qi in the meridians and allowing the qi and blood to naturally take away the extravasated blood. However, Li Yundong had used his powerful aura to disperse the extravasated blood and tumors in Zhou Qin's body. Although this couldn't be done in one go, the method was right, and the effect was surprisingly fast. After Li Yundong transferred yuanqi for as long as an hour, he began to stop. After a while, he raised his hand, squatted in front of Zhou Qin, and asked, "How do you feel just now?" Zhou Qin opened her eyes and said with a smile, "I feel so hot all over." Li Yundong glanced at her and said, "Then hurry up and go into the room. It's windy outside. Don't let the wind blow into your body through your pores. That will become moisture, which will aggravate the condition." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Okay." Li Yundong pushed Zhou Qin into the ward, then picked her up and prepared to put her on the bed. However, as soon as Li Yundong's hand touched Zhou Qin, he found that her clothes were already soaked, and even the hair on her neck was wet. Li Yundong frowned and picked up a towel by the bedside. "Can this towel be used to wipe sweat?" Zhou Qin nodded and stared at the towel in Li Yundong's hand. Suddenly, she looked a little shy, but also a little expectant. Li Yundong didn't react for a moment. He just wanted to help Zhou Qin wipe the sweat off her body. Just now, he had used his powerful Yuanyang qi to help Zhou Qin open up many acupoints and meridians in her body. At this time, Zhou Qin's pores were wide open. If the sweat was not wiped clean in time, when the sweat evaporated automatically, some of the water vapor would drill into the human body through the pores and finally enter the meridians, forming moisture. In traditional Chinese medicine, this was called dampness invading the body. Many people didn't pay attention to it when they were young. When it rained, they got wet, or when they sweated profusely after exercise and didn't have time to dry themselves. Then the moisture would enter the body, and when there was a problem with the bones, the moisture would flow along the qi and blood, causing rheumatism. Li Yundong was a cultivator, so he could get rid of the moisture through qi, but Zhou Qin was not. If there was moisture in her body at this time, and Li Yundong helped her get rid of it in the future, it would take several times more effort. Because the moisture could be transferred, it was like a thief that got into the human body. It would run around everywhere, going wherever there was a gap. If Li Yundong wanted to get rid of the moisture, he would have to spend several times more effort to find it first, and then he would have to spend several times more effort to get rid of the moisture. At this time, Li Yundong had subconsciously regarded himself as a doctor. As the saying goes, doctors have no taboo. Li Yundong didn't think too much about it. He picked up the towel and began to help Zhou Qin wipe the sweat on her back. At first, Li Yundong wiped the sweat on Zhou Qin's neck, and then he naturally extended the towel to her back to wipe it. There were many acupuncture points on the back of a person, so when they sweated, the back was often the first to sweat, and the sweat was also the most. Zhou Qin was wearing the hospital's uniform. The clothes were loose, so Li Yundong reached in and put his hand in. Zhou Qin let out a soft cry, and her body trembled slightly, but she quickly held back. Her delicate jade-like skin felt Li Yundong's gentle wiping. After he finished wiping the sweat on Zhou Qin's back, he wanted to help her wipe other places, but when he looked at Zhou Qin and was about to speak, he saw that Zhou Qin's face was flushed and her eyes were fixed on him. Her eyes were full of amorous emotions, and her sinuses were constantly moving. In particular, Zhou Qin's snow-white chest was exposed, and there was an attractive ravine in it that made his blood boil. Li Yundong's heart suddenly trembled. He knew that he had been too engrossed for a moment and had lost his composure. Li Yundong coughed dryly, handed the towel to Zhou Qin, and said awkwardly, "You can wipe your chest yourself." Zhou Qin's face turned red. She took the towel in a daze, but after a while, she suddenly came to her senses and buried her head in the pillow, not daring to look up at Li Yundong. Li Yundong saw that she was so shy that her neck was red, and her ears were so red that they seemed to be dripping blood. He felt more and more embarrassed and coughed dryly. "You have to wipe the sweat away quickly, or it's not good for your health." Zhou Qin was like an ostrich. She suddenly pulled up the quilt and covered herself with it, then said in a trembling voice, "Turn around." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're covering yourself so tightly. Do you think I have X-ray vision?" With a swish, Zhou Qin threw a pillow from under the quilt at Li Yundong. She said in a trembling voice, "Turn around." Li Yundong caught the pillow and said with a wry smile, Okay, I'll turn around." Zhou Qin carefully poked her head out of the quilt and peeked at Li Yundong. Seeing that he had indeed turned around like a gentleman, she carefully put the towel into her clothes and gently wiped herself. With this wipe, Zhou Qin felt as if the towel was Li Yundong's hand, gently caressing her skin, causing her to tremble uncontrollably. Especially when she rubbed the soft peaks on her chest, her body trembled violently. Just as she was reminiscing, she suddenly heard Li Yundong cough and say, "Are you done? Don't take too long. It's not a joke for moisture to enter the body." Zhou Qin panicked. She quickly pulled out the towel and threw it at Li Yundong, saying angrily, "I'm done. Why are you rushing me?" Li Yundong caught it without looking back. As soon as he touched the towel, he felt a warm and moist feeling. His heart suddenly shook. This was the towel that Zhou Qin had used to wipe her chest just now. Although Li Yundong loved Su Chan deeply and his feelings for her had never wavered, he was still a human being after all. What's more, Zhou Qin had done so much for him. Even if he had a heart of stone, he would still be moved. At this moment, Li Yundong suddenly felt that the towel seemed to be fragrant and happy, and a faint virgin's desire rushed to his face. The moment Zhou Qin threw the towel, she also realized this. She was so shy that she shrank her head under the quilt, but after a while, she secretly peeked out a pair of eyes. She looked at the towel in Li Yundong's hand, and she was lost in thought. What is he thinking? Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong in a daze. Her eyes couldn't help but become softer and softer, like the soft water grass in a clear river, gently stirring the hard rocks by the river. At this moment, the ward was extremely quiet. Only a faint fragrance floated between the two of them, stirring their souls and seducing their hearts. Ahem, stop guessing. This book has a happy ending. What kind of happy ending? It's very simple. Good people will be rewarded, and bad people will be punished. In addition, the next chapter is the grand debut of the little girl. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.